Solar panels are expensive and you will never get your money back for them. They're ugly, they're undependable, they cause leaks in your roof and they could damage your roof. They only produce in the summer. They don't produce well in cold climates at all. And did you know that it takes more carbon to make a solar panel than it will ever save? Based on these statements, I would never go solar. With all the negatives about solar, why would anyone go solar? The fact of the matter is that there's enough solar installed in the United States to power 40 million homes. So why do people continue to go solar? Well, the statements are simply not true. One of the statements is subjective. Solar panels are ugly. And if that's your reason for not going solar, then that's fine. It's an opinion. Now, 10 years ago, solar panels were silver framed. They had silver frames, they're real shiny. They had white polka dots. They just weren't very attractive at all. But today's solar panels are all black framing, black back sheet, and black mounting. Depending on the solar panel layout on the roof, they can look aesthetically pleasing. Some people say they like the aesthetics of having solar panels on the roof. And at a very minimum, they'll say things like, I feel like I'm doing something good for the environment, and I'm locking in my prices. I'm locking in my rates. I'm not subjected to the rate hikes from the utility company. So they're saving money over time. Let's briefly discuss some of the other statements. Solar panels are unreliable. The truth is, solar generation is more reliable than any other electrical generation out there. Because there's no moving parts like geothermal, wind turbines, and of course, generation that comes from fossil fuels, they last a very long time. And that's why solar panels generally have a 25-year warranty from the manufacturer. In fact, there's solar panels that were put on satellites back in the 1960s that were launched in outer space and are still working today. So in terms of solar panels being dependable, there's not much out there that's more dependable for electric generation than solar panels. Solar panels are expensive and you'll never get your money back. This statement is simply not true for most cases. Now, there are several variables to consider here. One, do you have a roof that is unobstructed, meaning there's no shading from trees or other items between the hours of 10 and 2 p.m.? If you have unobstructed roof area or an area for a ground-mounted system, generally speaking, at least in the Mid-Atlantic area and here in Pennsylvania, we see a return on investment or a payback period of about 5 to 8 years if you're not using financing. It's another thing to take into consideration. If you're financing the system and you pay an APR, that will make the payback longer for a solar electric system. If you only have a north-facing roof for solar panels, well, then you can expect a system to produce about 40% less on a north-facing roof than a south-facing roof, or even an east or west-facing roof. So that's something to take into consideration. What is your current electric rate, and what are you paying monthly for the electric that you currently receive versus how much would you pay monthly for a solar electric system? It's an easy calculation. If you determine how many kilowatt hours the solar electric system will produce per year, take that kilowatt hour amount times what you currently pay per kilowatt hour to figure out what your annual savings are for the solar electric system. Most consumers can expect about a 6 to 8 year return on investment or a payback period if they don't finance solar. People that do finance the solar electric system, even if they finance it 100%, generally they are looking to see if their monthly payments are equal or a little less than what they pay the electric company currently. Many people who finance the solar electric system are simply looking to see if their payments are equal or less than what they currently pay the electric company. Even if the payments are about the same and there are no savings up front, one thing to take into account is that electric rates do rise over time. So if you do financing for, say, 20 or 25 years for your solar electric system, keep in mind that in 10 years, what you're paying the electric company could be double what you're currently paying versus the solar payments being the same monthly for the entire term. One other thing to look at when you're financing a system is it transferable? So if you do a 25-year term and 10 years into the term, when I'm talking about term, I'm talking about the financing for the solar electric system. If in 10 years into the term you decide to sell the house, you should have the option to pay it off or simply transfer it, and the new owner could take over where you left off. So if you have 25 years, you're 10 years in, they would make those payments for 15 years and then they would own the system. Solar panels damage the roof. Here's another statement we hear a lot, and the fact is that solar panels can actually protect your roof. Keep in mind that it's usually the southern side that solar panels are placed. This is where the most sun hits the roof. Generally speaking, solar panels can increase the longevity of your asphalt shingles. Why? Well, it's UV degradation, the sun hitting the roof, which is where the solar panels are generally installed, on the southern portions of the house, on the southern facing roofs. These are the surfaces that wear the quickest from UV. So by placing solar panels over the entire roof, in essence, you're protecting the roof, and it should last longer. Not to mention, it also helps with cooling over the summer, as the sun is not absorbing, the heat's not absorbing from the sun into the shingles, but reflecting off the surface of the glass of the solar panels instead. With all this said, it is important to choose a reputable installer who not only uses flashings with each solar penetration, but they make sure that it's done right, and they offer a guarantee and a leak-proof guarantee with their system. The amount of carbon emissions it takes to make one solar panel is way more than what a solar panel can ever save. Again, this is a myth that simply is not true. The fact is, the amount of emissions it takes to make one solar panel can be made up in about 1 to 3 years of solar panel production. So what that means, over the life of a system, a solar panel is going to save about 10 times the amount of carbon as what it took to make that solar panel. There's also enough solar panels in the world to power all the solar panel manufacturing in the world. Solar panels only work in the summer, and it only works in climates that are warm. This simply is not true either. Now, in the Mid-Atlantic area, we see that we have on average about 3.5 peak sun hours per day on average. Places like Florida has about 4.5. So we're about 75% of what Florida has in terms of peak sun hours. If you have a roof that's oriented correctly and it's unobstructed, you could install a system that would produce more than a system in Florida. It is true that solar electric systems produce better in the summer. In fact, the summer and spring produces about twice as much as what a system will produce in the fall and the winter, and that's simply because there's just more sun hours in the spring and summer. However, it's still important to take into consideration the production in the fall and the winter, because that's going to make up your annual production times how many years you have the system, and that does make a difference. It's also important to consider what your rate is, what the rate you're currently paying for electricity from the utility company. If you have a very high rate, then it makes more sense to go solar. For instance, a consumer, a resident in Florida or California, could have a very low electric rate. And so it doesn't make as much sense as someone in, say, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey to go solar because they have a higher electric rate. So please take that into consideration as well. One last thing to consider is, what are the current incentives in your state? Are there SRECs available? Is there net metering? Are there any other incentives? This can really help it pencil out financially to go solar, regardless of what state you're in, a colder climate, a state with less peak sun hours. I hope I was able to shine a little light on some of the myths around solar. Thank you for watching.